I mean, I haven't done this by other venues, and I'm glad that other things exist, like phone and chat and in person. I don't think that stuff should stop. I mean, I think it should be easier to get help than not get help, and every mechanism ought to be available to people. Where text is concerned, here's what we know works well. By the third message, they've told us everything. It's anonymous, it's private, nobody hears you, there's no judgment. You don't hear someone sighing or gasping when you share something. And so 65% of our texters say they've shared something with us they've never shared with another human being. People really open up, and open up quickly.
Welcome, everyone. It is a real pleasure to have on for discussion today Nancy Lublin, who's the founder and CEO of Crisis Text Line. There are a lot of amazing things that Nancy has done, and I hope we're going to be able to get into some of them. But Nancy, I want to start with your founding story for Crisis Text Line. What led you to found it?
I was a CEO of a totally different organization called DoSomething.org. And Do Something works with young people to encourage them to volunteer and get involved in the community and do social change, all by text. It has about 6 million members right now, all by text. And every week, Do Something texts them a different thing they can do around collecting food for food pantries, or lately they've been doing a lot of voter registration work. And every time Do Something texts out that message, a couple 100,000 kids do those campaigns. I mean, it's a massive, massive thing. But there's always a couple dozen text messages back that are out of flow, having nothing to do with that campaign, but about something personal, like about being bullied or about abuse at home or something like that. And we were triaging those like anybody would do in customer service when they get something out of flow. So we would respond by saying, hey, you should talk to your school principal or check out this organization, and we'd give them a number for a hotline. And then we got a message that said, he won't stop raping me. It's my dad. He told me not to tell anyone. And the letters, are you there? So we sent back the phone number for RAIN, the Rape and Incest Organization in D.C. They're terrific. And the next day I came in and said if we heard back from her. And it's been 7 years now, and we've never heard back from her. I don't know. I don't know if it was a burner phone. I don't know if her dad saw the message. I don't know if she's dead or alive. And about a year ago, one of my employees said, you always use a female pronoun. You have no way of knowing if that texter even was female, which, fair enough. I don't.
And so you left DoSomething.org and just went off on your own and started Crisis Text Line. How long did it take? How anxious were you about the process?
Yeah, a little crazier than that. I did both at the same time for a while, which I don't recommend. I did both at the same time for a while, and it took me a while to get it off the ground. So do the math. We got that message 7 years ago, and Crisis Text Line is 5 years old. So it took me 2 years to get it off the ground. It's hard to start new things. Even if you have experience, it's hard to start new stuff, especially new charitable entities.
And at what moment did you know, I'm going to devote 100% of my time to this?
It grew really quickly. I mean, when we did launch in August 2013, within 4 months, we were in all 295 area codes in the United States organically. So it spread very, very quickly. And I was really just on the board and had hired a number of people to run it. And then about a year and a half in, we realized it was taking off very quickly. And, an organization is kind of like a baby. It needs its mommy. And so I left Do Something and just did Crisis Text Line full time.
One of the things that we're doing on Crazy Good Turns in the last few episodes is talking to folks who are using technology in different and interesting ways. And you have one of my favorite quotes on this. It comes from a TED Talk that you did in 2015, which I recommend to all of our listeners to look up. I want to give you the quote and then ask you to comment on it. And the quote is, "The only difference between me and those people in hoodies down the road with their fat-funded companies is that I am not inspired by helping you find Chinese food at 2 a.m. in Dallas, or helping you touch your wrist and get a car immediately, or swipe right and get laid. I want to use tech and data to make the world a better place." That's an awesome sentence or set of sentences. How did you get to that realization? Was that a starting point? Where does that come from?
The amazing truth behind that is, so that was the ending of the TED Women talk that I gave 3 years ago. And it was not planned. That was totally off the cuff because I was at TED Women, and I mean, as you would assume, it's mostly women. And I was on the stage and I looked up and I saw a friend of mine who's a venture capitalist walk in the back of the room. And I was like, what is he doing here? And then I remembered he's the diversity partner for his venture firm. He's a white guy, just to be clear. He's a white guy from Stanford. And he, at the time, was the partner at his firm who was assigned to understand diversity. And I was just so like, are you kidding me? You're just going to sort of stand in the back of the room while I give this talk? That basically I got fired up by seeing him in the back of the room, and I just spoke from the heart. And your recanting of that quote was generous and calm. I was more animated when I did it, and it was all from the heart and spontaneous. But I mean it. I mean, look, they're doing so much stupid shit with technology. It's just for themselves. There's so much stuff in Silicon Valley that's being made for Silicon Valley. We need the best minds on the biggest problems. We need the best technology on the biggest problems. And right now, I'm not convinced that's where the best people are going.
So I have so many different comments of yours to get into. Another one that I thought was really interesting that I'd love for you to share your thoughts with our listeners is you describe yourself as an entrepreneur, but an entrepreneur in a charitable organization basically is raising around every year. And I thought that was such a great description. And maybe you talk about what that feels like, and do you get some cumulative energy behind you, or is every year you're out, plowing new ground every year?
Honestly, it's a constant. I mean, anybody who's listening right now who's ever been involved with a not-for-profit organization knows it's like being on a hamster wheel. Or who's ever read Sartre, We Clos, No Exit. It's kind of what it feels like. Yeah, it's constant. I would love to say that it's like raising a round every year, but at least when people raise a round, and it looks like rounds are being raised so quickly these days, like every 12 to 18 months, those are raised in 3 months, and then at least the other 9 months you're working on the product. I think the not-for-profit sector, most leaders of not-for-profits and most board members of not-for-profits, all they're doing is constantly holding out their hand and asking for money. I mean, there are people who haven't seen the backs of other people's hands in a long time. And it's just a terrible business model. I mean, it really makes no sense. And once again, this is for the most important stuff in society, and it doesn't really have a real business model. And it's this weird, please give me money so I can do great things. And I'll thank you, and I'll give you a plaque or host a dinner where we honor you so that you feel good.
When you set out your vision in front of others, what's more compelling, the personal stories or the data analytics that you're able to drive through what you're doing?
That's a great question. I would say for the first 42 years of my life, I was going off that anecdote. And like most charities, I was doing dinners where you bring up some people on the stage and you make the people in the audience cry and you hope they've had enough to drink so that they bid on the auction item and write a big check. I mean, that is this weird handshake in the not-for-profit sector. And with Crisis Text Line, I believe that we are running a tech startup, and so I'm trying to run it that way. I also think it's one thing to run a charity. That doesn't mean you are a charity. And so I've decided to just go head on and lead with the data. And so I talk about the numbers to answer your question. When I sit down with people, I'm like, look, here's the deal. And you're either going to be into this or you're not. But I'm not going to make you cry. And I'm not going to tell you an anecdote. I'm not going to have someone whose, child evaded suicide because we were there for them that night, call you or write you a letter. I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to say, look, here's the reality. Here's the numbers. Here's what's really hard about what we're doing. Here's what's expensive. And you're either going to be into it or you're not.
So what is some of that data? What do you lay out in front of people?
I like to show just it's like a pig in ninth grade biology. I like to kind of splay our insides and lay it on the table. We have access to all of that data. So we skew young, poor, rural, and diverse. And so I talk about who our texters are. I talk about what kinds of issues they text in about and what the top 5 issues are, because I think that's pretty surprising. So it's relationships, depression, suicide, anxiety, and self-harm, which I did not anticipate being in the top 5. I really thought bullying would be in there.
And can you see changes over the last several years? Does the data change or does it reinforce patterns? What are you seeing?
Yeah, good questions. We see seasonality. So we know that March through May is the toughest time for suicide. We see that while everybody thinks holiday is a really tough time of year, holiday's actually great. Holiday's terrific. Things kind of slow down for us over holiday, so that's good. We see time of day. So we see that substance abuse, for example, spikes actually at 6 a.m., which I wouldn't have anticipated. So we're busting all kinds of myths by having the volume, velocity, and variety in this corpus to draw meaningful conclusions and spot trends.
That's really interesting. Let me switch gears for a second, and because we share law school experience in common. My description of law school is that it's a place that teaches people to care about things no normal person would ever care about. You've described law school as a place where ideas go to die. And so tell me, so you started at law school, when did you change your mind, or did you graduate?
I started law school, and within the first few weeks, I was baking a chocolate cake every week and not even letting it continue to bake and taking it out of the oven and attacking it with a fork. That was within the first few weeks. Yeah, law school sucked almost immediately, and I was like, this is not like what I thought it was going to be from TV. But I was both single. So when I dropped out, I was both single and not going to be a lawyer. So my parents and grandparents were very upset. So I started Dress for Success when I was a 1L in my first year. And I did both at the same time because that seems to be my MO. And then after my second year, when nobody drops out, right? Like you drop out in your first year. I dropped out after my second year, which was so dumb. And like I said, I was both single and not going to be a lawyer. So my whole family was pissed. I eventually did go back and finish, but like by taking classes at the business school and letting me transfer it in. And then I took one course called admin law. And I don't know what it was about. I do know that I took it because I saw that there were a lot of those summary books in the bookstore. And so I never went to class, and I bought the summary book and then I took the final. And when I say I never went to class, people are like, oh, yeah. I mean, when I showed up for the final, I noticed that there was more than one section of admin law and I didn't know my professor's name. So I had to go to the registrar's office. Went to the registrar's office, and it wasn't computerized back then, so I had to say, who is my professor? They had to look up my paper file, give me the name of my professor, and so I walked into my final 20 minutes late and then took the final. Yep, that happened.
Would you tell a little bit of the story behind Dress for Success? Because you describe yourself as an entrepreneur, so it's great to hear about the other things that you've done along the path to Crisis Text Line.
I mean, I was always doing stuff. I was a weird kid. I tried to dig to China once.
That wasn't successful.
No, but landscapers did have to be called in because I made a very big hole in the backyard. Yeah, so, no, I was in law school and clearly miserable. It was like a really cold February New York day where the rain comes down sideways in your face. And I had my thick textbooks in my backpack. I got home and there was an envelope with the return address from a lawyer in Hollywood, Florida. And I didn't know there was a Hollywood in Florida. And so I thought, someone's suing me. So I carefully opened up the envelope and inside was a check made out to me for $5,000 from the estate of my great-grandfather. I mean, he had died years earlier, so I wasn't like, that part wasn't the surprise. But he was amazing. He was the person in my family who came here with nothing. And the person who walked uphill both ways, barefoot kind of thing. And it was really strange to get a windfall from his death. And so I stood there with a check in my hands and was like, Poppy Max is still gone. And this is so weird. I didn't earn this. It's not my money. And I got into the elevator. And by the time I got to the 6th floor where I lived, I had the idea for Dress for Success.
And then leaving that for Do Something. What was the story behind that?
So I built Dress for Success. That was really my first That was my first full-time job. So I built Dress for Success, and it was in over 70 cities in 4 countries, and it was really...
So maybe describe a little the purpose of it. What?
So that helps women transition from welfare to work, and it gives them suits and confidence and helps them with resume writing and interviewing skills so that they can reclaim their destiny and really set their whole family on a different path. Because when you help a woman, you really help everybody around her. I did that, and then I kind of got bored because it was just more of the same in different locations. And there were these amazing entrepreneurs in each city who were really running things. And so I did what entrepreneurs do. I left, which was like stepping off a flat earth. But I left. And then I got this phone call out of the blue from Andrew Shue, who, of course, had been on Melrose Place. So I giggled my way through that phone call because he is adorable. He had started something called Do Something, and it was awesome when he was on Melrose Place. But now that he wasn't on Melrose Place anymore, it had really fallen on hard times. And they needed someone to come save it and turn it around. And I thought, that sounds amazing. I would love to do an organization that makes volunteerism and social change cool for young people. So I did that.
And then the transition from Do Something to Crisis Text Line. And do you ever look back? Do you go, boy, I'm sorry I left, or I should have left sooner, or I wish I had started this earlier?
I feel both ways. What's so weird is I miss Do Something every day. It was such a fun job. It was such an incredible group of people. It was a little bit PayPal-ish. You know how PayPal has spawned so many other startups? Crisis Text Line grew from the rib of Do Something, but so did so many other organizations, both for-profit and not-for-profit. There are so many people from Do Something who are now off doing incredible social change and do good things, and we're all in touch with each other. It was just a lot of fun. It was a silly, fun, hopeful. I mean, if you're at an organization that works with young people to make a difference, you're inherently an optimist because you believe it's possible to make a difference. You believe that young people can make a difference. And so it's like one of the few places with woke, politically correct millennials who are positive, not negative. It was really fun. And they kept me young. And, I watched iCarly on Friday nights for a living. It was part of my job. It was a really good time. And so to answer one of those questions, yeah, I probably stayed too long. I stayed a long time. But I stayed until I had an amazing successor who had come there right out of college and just crushed it and kept moving up the ranks and was our COO. And I finally looked at her and said, I am the only thing between you and being CEO, and I've got to get out of the way. And I just didn't have the idea yet. Not an easy thing to do. And then Crisis Text Line came along and I started doing that. And I said to her, I'm really going to leave. And she said, no, you're not. And I said, no, I really am. And so she is CEO there today and one of my best friends in the world. And she made me a better leader then, and she makes me a better person now. And she's incredible. And so now I'm at Crisis Text Line. But to answer your question, I probably stayed too long. And it was so much fun and I miss it every day. But if I had left any earlier, I might not have done what I'm doing now. Does that make sense?
Yep, completely. And just back to Crisis Text Line, what are the advantages and disadvantages of having conversations, such emotionally profound conversations in a text-only medium?
Well, I mean, I haven't done this by other venues, and I'm glad that other things exist, like phone and chat and in person. I don't think that stuff should stop. I mean, I think it should be easier to get help than not get help, and every mechanism ought to be available to people. Where text is concerned, here's what we know works well. By the third message, they've told us everything. It's anonymous, it's private, nobody hears you, there's no judgment. You don't hear someone sighing or gasping when you share something. And so 65% of our texters say they've shared something with us they've never shared with another human being. People really open up and open up quickly.
That's interesting. Is there a common pattern on the steps to the 3 texts that you get everything? Is it the first one's very tentative, or is the first one like your original example, just a scream for help and then detail from there?
No, it really depends on how the texter really leads. So we don't have a script. We have some best practices and things that phases of a conversation that we try to work through and things to avoid, but we're not working off a script. The idea is to be human and to be caring and take someone from a hot moment to a cool calm.
Do you see a point, and are you at a point with the data that you're collecting where predictive analytics have a role to play, where you can say, gee, I'm listening to A, B, and C. I know it's likely to lead to this?
We've now processed more than 80 million messages, and they're all collected, stored, and analyzed in real time. And so we have layered on some machine learning analytics onto that. So, for example, one thing that we do is we triage based on severity. So instead of taking everybody in chronological order, we take them more like a hospital emergency room would take them, where you take like the person having a heart attack or a gunshot wound before the kid with a sprained ankle. So we do the same thing. And based on what you say to us, the algorithm reads the message as imminent risk or not, kind of ranks people in the queue. So when we first built the algorithm, we put in some words like die, suicide, overdose, gun. And if those words showed up, we put you number one in the queue, and we took you in about 2 minutes. And then we layered on machine learning after we got to about 20 million messages. And again, now we're over 80. But then we layered on machine learning, which meant the algorithm got smarter as it went along. And we found that there were actually thousands of words and word combinations, really, that were more lethal than the word suicide. Like the word military is twice as likely that we will have to call 911 than the word suicide. The unhappy face crying emoji is 4 times as likely that we will have to call 911 than the word suicide. And there's one family of words that are the most lethal words in America that we've seen. They're somewhere between 3 and 16 times more likely that we're going to have to call 911 than if you said, I want to commit suicide. So those are words like Xanax, Percocet, Tylenol, ibuprofen, Advil, any named pill, any named drug. If you name those, the algorithm reads that as you not only have the ideation and the plan, but you probably have the means, because that's within your grasp, and you probably have the timing, and that's the 4-part ladder up risk assessment. And so those people get put number one in the queue. And now that we've put a machine learning layer into this triaging system, we're now taking our imminent risk people in about 38 seconds.
Wow. Of course, our mental health infrastructure has lots of issues to begin with, but do you have ways of sharing this data in a useful way with the 911 responders and hospitals and the like?
Well, we're not hoarding it, that's for sure. I mean, we're aggregating it, anonymizing it, and putting as much of this out there as we can. If you go to crisistrends.org, you asked about the 911 operators. I'm so glad you did, because they are some of my favorite people, and they're just forgotten. I'm so glad that Fox now has that show, 911, because for years there are all these cop shows and EMS and fire, but like you don't call the police, you don't call fire, you call 911. They are the gateway for everything in this country, natural disasters, personal emergencies, everything. They see it all. They are tireless. They are right there on the front lines, and no one throws like a parade for them. They are unsung heroes, and I've met some really good ones through doing this work. And I've actually watched. You know how you kind of do like a ride along in a police car. I've done a sit along. It's called at a couple of 911 offices, what are called PSAPs, and they are masters of multitasking. Oh my goodness. They're amazing. Amazing, amazing people. And yeah, 911 is funded, are you ready for this, by local landline taxes. I'm keeping a landline in my apartment in New York City. My husband keeps wanting to get rid of it, and I'm like, no. In part because I want to pay the tax on my land. I've never wanted to pay a tax on anything.
So that tax presumably is dwindling as we speak.
Dwindling, totally.
So what's the best advice that you've gotten from others who are helping you, encouraging you in what you're doing with Crisis Text Line?
The board treasurer from DoSomething.org, this is like 10 years ago, once gave me advice. Somebody else doesn't have to lose for you to win. And that was pretty darn good advice. I've been very surprised at how competitive the mental health space is. There's a lot of organizations who all really care about the same thing, but who don't necessarily care about each other. I mean, I think the not-for-profit sector, we all care about the same stuff, but there's this small pool of money that most people are fighting for. And also, there's so much pride in what you do that you kind of tend to look down your nose at everybody else. It's hard. I mean, these are passion. I mean, I think if you work at your McDonald's, every once in a while, you probably do have a Wendy's hamburger or a Taco Bell. That it's not like that. Like in the animal space, in the autism space, in the breast cancer space, these organizations are so passionate about what they do that they don't necessarily like hang with each other much. That has been one of the surprises in the mental health space, I'll be honest. There's a handful of organizations who've been lovely and have really kind of showed us the ropes, and we'd like to work with everybody. We don't really think of ourselves as having any competitors, but there's definitely some competitive feelings out there in the space.
What keeps you going? What gets you to the next round of fundraising or the constant effort on fundraising? What's the vision that's propelling you or the energy source that's propelling you?
I mean, I have hard days. I'll be honest, I have really hard days. I mean, the thing about being an entrepreneur is that you have signed up to live on the roller coaster of like the excitement of going up and the excitement of going down, and that is normal, and it is exhausting. And then you put that in America in 2018, and which already feels exhausting, and I'm on that roller coaster. And the thing that keeps me going, this morning at 4 a.m., I was on the platform handling conversations for a couple of hours. That the thing we make, the thing we do, is the thing that I'm really in love with. I'm not in love with the funding, I don't know, I'm really what I'm most in love with. The organization, even, people are like, oh, I'm here for the team. I felt that way at Do Something. At Do Something, I would have, it was all about that team. At Crisis Text Line, it's about our community. It's really about our volunteers, our crisis counselors, and being on the platform with them, helping other people. It's magical. It's amazing. It's this group of people, and the service that we do is just strangers, helping other strangers in their darkest moments. I'm really there for the mission. I'm really there for the purpose, side by side with the volunteers. And that's the thing that keeps me going and fires me up.
Where do you see Crisis Text Line 3 years from now?
My hope is to be in 15 countries in the next 3 years.
Oh, wow. So it's geographical expansion.
That's right. I mean, I think we'll grow in the U.S. also, but I've got my eyes outside the U.S.
Why is that?
Because there are a lot of countries that have no mental health services at all. Because if we can grow outside the U.S. right now, it's international, so country by country. But eventually, I think the translation tools and the privacy standards will flatten and be more standardized so that we can actually counsel each other, which will help us with nighttime capacity needs in the U.S. with other time zones chipping in. And because I think that having a global data set, when crisistrends.org is global from around the world, I think will really put mental health on a global map as something critical and important.
That's fantastic. And how about yourself? Personally, 3 years from now, is this you're still there, or something might come up that's different? How do you, as an entrepreneur, how do you think about this?
I don't. That's the irony. Is I think people think entrepreneurs are always looking at the horizon and thinking about what's next. And the thing about every entrepreneur I know is that we are lousy at thinking about ourselves. So I haven't had a physical in 8 years. I'm going to the doctor in a couple of weeks. I have not been to a doctor in 8 years. I also just don't get sick because I just don't have time. So that's just not really an option. And the entrepreneurs that I know are kind of like this. We are terrible planners for ourselves. We're great for our kids, for our friends, for our companies, but we come last. And that's whether you're a not-for-profit entrepreneur or a for-profit entrepreneur or whatever.
Can you think of a distinction between the for-profit entrepreneur and the not-for-profit entrepreneur that you found as you've interacted with different folks on both sides?
I don't have a Tesla.
That's great. That's terrific. So one final question for you. Advice that you would give to others who are thinking about how they might approach doing something similar. Obviously not in the same space, but going out and trying to do something great for other people.
Going out and doing something great for other people is easy. I mean, you could do it right now for a stranger or for someone you haven't talked to in a long time or a family member or repairing a relationship that's fallen. I mean, doing something nice for somebody else is not hard. And you could do it immediately and it doesn't even have to cost any money. Starting an entire organization around it is hard and expensive, and I don't recommend it. I really don't. But I don't think we need more organizations. I think we need better run organizations and better funded organizations. But I don't know that we need more new ones. I think we've become obsessed with founders. I think we should become obsessed with COOs and just make the things that we have better. I think we need some M&A activity in the not-for-profit space, some efficiency. There are no market forces to encourage that. So if you're a funder, you're somebody who could just have the same scrutiny that you would have when investing in a for-profit. But if you want to make a difference, there is nothing holding you back this very second but your own imagination.
That is a brilliant answer, by the way. That is a brilliant answer. Nancy, thank you so much for being on this episode and allowing us to highlight the amazing things you and your organization are doing. It was a real pleasure talking.
Thanks. We need volunteers. CrisisTextLine.org. We're looking for volunteers always.
Terrific. Thank you, Nancy.
Thanks.